Hi, my name's Jarek, and I paid my parents' mortgage for 5 years, every month without fail. They told me, this house will be yours one day. But that day never came. Instead, they gave the house to my brother, the same brother who once used my name to take out a loan I never knew about, the same brother who vanished when things went south. Worse than the betrayal was the silence. So why did I keep giving? Why did they keep taking? And what do you do when your family's love is built on debt you never agreed to carry? The dining room lights were soft, but the tension in the air was sharp enough to cut through the leftover roast chicken on the table. I sat at the edge of my chair, arms folded loosely across my stomach, trying to appear at ease. Across from me sat Alma and Thaddeus, my parents, both focused on scraping the last bits of food from their plates. No one was in a hurry to talk, and the clink of silverware on ceramic filled the silence. Finally, Thaddeus cleared his throat. "We've been thinking about the mortgage," he began, eyes shifting toward my mother, as if seeking approval. Alma spoke instead. "Just for a little while longer, Jarek, until things settle?" I nodded slowly, jaw tight but lips smiling. "Of course, I've got it covered." I reached for my water glass, sipping carefully. It had become almost ritualistic at this point. For the past 5 years, I'd made their mortgage payments like clockwork: groceries, medical expenses, utilities when they spiked in winter. It wasn't a sacrifice. At least that's what I told myself. They'd done so much for me growing up, right? Still, each time I signed another check, a small voice inside me wondered how long a little while would last. The house, our house, had once been promised to me. Not on paper, of course. Just Thaddeus's hand on my shoulder during a stormy night back when I was 28, whispering, "One day, this'll be yours. You're the one keeping it standing." I had taken that to heart, built my plans around it. These days, my job as a financial advisor didn't leave much time for fantasies. I worked out of a modest suite in downtown Springfield. I'd passed up vacations and new cars to squirrel away enough for a lake house out near Clinton Lake, just a small place where I could breathe. But breathing didn't come easy anymore. There was always something. My mother's arthritis flared. My father's pension dried up. Kalen, their golden boy, had moved back from New York, supposedly regrouping after selling his startup. Except no one ever said what it had been. No product, no name. At dinner last Thursday, Kalen arrived in a tailored jacket and worn sneakers. Alma beamed as if he'd just come home from a deployment. "He's got ideas," she said proudly, spooning potatoes onto his plate. A real visionary. I passed the salad, said nothing. Kalen was good at entrances, always had been. He could make people laugh with the flick of a sentence, charm entire rooms before dessert. But behind that charm was a man who never stayed long enough to clean up. Last weekend we had a family barbecue. Old friends, cousins. Sunlight bounced off aluminum trays filled with beans and brisket. I'd just refilled the lemonade when one of my cousins leaned in and said, "It's good you're the stable one, Jarek. Kalen's got the brains. You've got the spreadsheets." Laughter erupted. I smiled back, slow and tight. Later that night, while the laughter still echoed faintly in my mind, I packed a bag and drove to the lake house. I didn't even bother turning on the TV. I just sat on the back porch, watching the ripples across the water. It was quiet out there. Still. And in that stillness, something surfaced. I started thinking about the house I'd kept afloat all these years. Every roof repair, every emergency fund, every month I'd tightened my own budget to make sure my parents stayed warm, fed, and stable. Yet, the house still wasn't mine. Not even close. What if it never would be? The thought slithered in uninvited and took root. I wanted to believe I was overthinking it, being dramatic. But there it was, pulsing behind my temples. Just as I leaned back and tried to shake the doubt from my head, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. A message. "Family dinner tomorrow night. Kaylin's got an announcement." The message from Alma came just after 8 the next morning. "Dinner at the house tonight. Kaylin has something to share." No emoji, no punctuation, just that. I stared at it for a while, then locked my phone and left it on the counter. Something about the tone stuck with me all day, like a pebble in my shoe I couldn't shake out. But by 6 that evening, I was pulling into their driveway in Pleasant Hill, as expected. Not because I wanted to, because it's what I did. There were 3 cars already there. One was Alma's Honda, the other Thaddeus's beat-up pickup, and the third, a sleek silver BMW I didn't recognize. A rental, or worse, belonged to the announcement. Inside, the table was set more formally than usual. Cloth napkins, candles, real wine glasses, not the mismatched ones they usually used. Thaddeus stood near the oven, fussing with a meat thermometer. Alma arranged asparagus on a platter with a seriousness that belonged to holidays, not Tuesdays. Then I heard her voice. "Hi, you must be Jarek." Sasha. Tall, perfect posture, manicured hand extended before I even got through the archway. Her teeth gleamed like she practiced for headshots. "Kaylin's told me so much about you," she said. "I bet." Kaylin walked in behind her, a smug half-grin on his face like he knew something the rest of us didn't. He wrapped an arm around her waist as Alma kissed Sasha on the cheek. Thaddeus offered me a quick nod, then returned to his roast. Over dinner, conversation buzzed around Sasha. Her brief but transformative time at a San Francisco tech firm, how she was between ventures but ready for the next thing. Alma nodded along like she'd already printed business cards for her. Every toast was for Kaylin. His resilience, his courage to start again. No one toasted the guy footing the house payments. I picked at my food, smiled politely. I even laughed at the story about Kaylin's college roommate burning popcorn and setting off the dorm alarms. Then dessert came, and the real performance started. "Stability," Alma said, spooning whipped cream onto Sasha's pie. "That's what matters most, and Kaylin, he deserves a fresh start." Sasha grinned, playing along like she was rehearsed. "A house would be a great start, wouldn't it?" Everyone laughed. I didn't. I sipped my wine and forced a smile so tight it felt like my jaw would crack. I wasn't in on the joke. I was the punchline. After dinner, I drifted into the kitchen. Alma was rinsing plates. I stepped in beside her, automatically reaching for the drying towel. "You always were dependable," she said, not looking at me. "That's what we love about you." That was it. "No, thanks for helping us stay afloat." "No, I saw the check this week." Just that line, like I was a faucet that never ran dry, always running, always expected to run. I left before coffee was served. In the driveway, Kaylin clapped me on the back like we were frat brothers. "Thanks for coming around, man. I know you're busy, with all your spreadsheets." I nodded, slid into my car. His laughter trailed off as I shut the door. Spreadsheets? Not brother? Not son? Just spreadsheets. The drive to the lake house was long and dark, but my thoughts were louder than the tires on the asphalt. I replayed everything: Sasha's polished charm, Alma's glowing pride, the roast, the toast, the candles, and that line again. It must be nice to have a brother who does numbers. The steering wheel creaked under my grip. As I pulled into the gravel drive, the porch light flicked on automatically, casting a pool of soft gold over the steps. I killed the engine but didn't get out right away. Inside, the lake house was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't unpack. I didn't pour a drink. I sat in the dark, listening to the creaks of the settling house, the occasional splash from the lake. And I thought, for the first time, not just with frustration, but with clarity. If this house, the one I paid for, wasn't really mine in their eyes, what else had I been lied to about? Friday came fast, maybe too fast. I buried myself in work that morning, anything to delay thinking about what Kaylin's exciting news might be. I'd learned the hard way that news in our family usually meant something for him, and a blindfold for me. At the office, I moved through emails and numbers with a practiced rhythm, new client onboarding, portfolio rebalance reports. I clicked through them, losing myself in the logic. For a few hours, the world made sense. Formulas, projections, timelines. Unlike family, numbers don't lie. Then a notification popped up. Final mortgage payment processed. I stared at the screen. It was done. The house was paid off. The same house I'd been pouring money into for 5 years, check by check, month after month, through job transitions, lean seasons, even during Mom's hospital stays. There it was. Zero balance. A moment that should have felt victorious. Instead, it just felt quiet. I leaned back, closed my eyes. Maybe now was the right time to finally ask them. Not demand. Just formalize things. Something in writing. Later that afternoon, I took a long lunch at a small diner near the courthouse. The kind of place where they still serve fries in paper-lined baskets, and the waitress calls you Hun. I scribbled a few notes in my planner while waiting for my sandwich. At the top, I wrote, "Ask Dad about title transfer?" My mind drifted, back to a winter night years ago. I was 28, crawling around the attic with a flashlight, patching a leak while rain hammered the roof. Downstairs, Kaylin had brought friends over for a game night. The laughter had echoed up through the vents while I worked. Afterward, Dad found me in the kitchen, soaked and shivering, still holding the flashlight. He clapped me on the shoulder and said, "One day, this place'll be yours. You're the only one who keeps it standing." I didn't know back then how slippery the word promise could be. By the time I got back to the office, I felt steady again. Practical. Logical. I wasn't being petty. I was being responsible. That evening, Alma called. "Dinner tonight, don't forget," she said cheerfully. "Kaylin's got something exciting to share." My stomach tightened. I hesitated just long enough for her to notice. "What's wrong?" she asked, too quickly. "Nothing," I lied. "Just finishing up a few things." "Good," she replied. "We'll see you at 7. I arrived a few minutes early, but the house was already buzzing. Sasha greeted me at the door with a glass of wine and a rehearsed smile. Kaylin stood at the head of the dining table like a groom about to deliver a wedding toast. Alma floated between the kitchen and the table, her energy unmistakably rehearsed. Even Thaddeus looked polished, freshly shaved, in a clean button-down. The roast sat perfectly carved at the center. Candles flickered. The room smelled like celebration. Kaylin waited until dessert to drop it. "We're starting a business," he announced, lacing his fingers with Sasha's. "Something real, something meaningful." Alma nodded eagerly. "They've got such a vision. It's going to help so many people." "And," Thaddeus added, lifting his wine glass, "to support them as they begin this new journey, we've decided to gift them the house." Silence fell, except for Sasha, who gasped and clapped her hands together. I didn't say anything. Couldn't. I just sat there, frozen, the words tumbling in my ears like a foreign language. Gift them the house I'd just paid off, the house I'd fixed, financed, fought for. Nobody looked at me. Not even once. Sasha kissed Alma on the cheek. Kaylin smiled like he'd been handed his birthright. Thaddeus beamed. I finished my wine in one swallow. When Kalen raised his glass again, "To family generosity." No one noticed I didn't raise mine. They toasted, laughed, went back to talking about startup names and Sasha's influencer strategy. I slipped out during coffee. No goodbyes, no coat, just keys in hand and steps too quick for anyone to follow. Driving back to the lake house, I didn't turn on music. Didn't answer the phone when Brent called. I kept both hands on the wheel, white-knuckled. The gravel crunched under the tires as I pulled in. I walked straight into the kitchen, opened the cabinet, and poured myself a bourbon. No ice. It was the first drink I'd had in 2 years. I took it out to the porch, sat in the same chair I'd sat in hundreds of times, and stared out at the black water. "I paid for everything," I whispered, "and I didn't even get a thank you." I'd gone through my taxes 100 times before without thinking much of it. But this year, as I sat at my desk, surrounded by a tidy stack of statements and printouts, something gnawed at me. The mortgage payoff had finally gone through, and part of me wanted to categorize it as a gift, one that might have future tax implications depending on what my parents decided about the house. I pulled up the county website to check the most recent property valuation. Just a quick confirmation, I told myself. One click turned into 2, then into something that made my throat dry. The title had changed. No longer listed under Alma or Thaddeus Williams. Instead, the owner on record was Kalen Williams. Effective date: 3 months ago. Same week I made that final balloon payment. I refreshed the page. Twice. The result didn't change. I checked again, this time pulling up archived transaction logs. There it was in black and white. Legal transfer filed, notarized, processed. They'd done it behind my back. Not just the idea of it, legally. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send a text. I printed the page and closed the browser. Then I walked slowly to the kitchen, grabbed the keys, and drove to the lake house. By the time I arrived, dusk had settled. I placed the printouts on the table, still warm from the printer, and poured myself a drink. Not out of habit, but as a statement. One shot, neat. I didn't even sit down. I just stared at the date printed on the corner of the page. They transferred it while I was still paying it off. They didn't even wait. The rest of the evening passed like I was underwater. I turned off my phone. Let the house go quiet. There was nothing left to say. But somehow they always found a way to make things louder again. 2 days later, I was back at their house for dinner. Alma had invited me with a cheerful voice like nothing had happened. "Just a casual meal," she'd said. "Roast beef, nothing fancy." I should have known better. The table was set as if we were hosting a holiday. Kalen and Sasha were already seated, mid-conversation about renovation potential. Kalen described how he wanted to open up the space, knock out the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. Sasha nodded thoughtfully, like she'd been visualizing it for weeks. I waited until dessert to speak. "When were you going to tell me?" I asked, setting my fork down. Alma looked up from her plate. "Tell you what, dear? That the house is legally Kalen's now." The room froze. Thaddeus blinked slowly, then reached for his water. Kalen leaned back, arms crossed. "It was the best decision for the family," Thaddeus said. Kalen added, "It made sense." Alma tried to smile. "You've always had your own place, Jarek, and we knew you wouldn't make a fuss." Make a fuss. I swallowed hard and stood up slowly. "I don't care that you gave it to him," I said evenly. "I care that you lied about it." "You were always the one who helped," Alma said, voice tight now. "But we had to do what's best for Kalen. You already have your lake house." That sentence, it snapped something. I didn't slam a door or shout. I just walked out, coat, untouched, hands in my pockets. I drove straight to the lake house again. No music, no calls. When I got there, I laid the printouts out across the kitchen island. I took a red pen and drew a single line under the date of transfer. Then I pulled a yellow legal pad from the drawer, sat down, and wrote across the top, "Unjust enrichment, case notes." I wasn't just angry anymore. I was documenting. I didn't sleep much after I wrote the words, "Unjust enrichment, case notes," across the top of that yellow legal pad. Instead, I flipped through the manila folder I'd labeled Proof, rereading everything I already knew by heart. 5 years of bank statements, receipts, scanned checks, email threads confirming every payment made. Nothing dramatic, just cold, clean numbers. Numbers didn't lie. People did. That Monday morning, I sat at my desk and drafted an email to Alma and Thaddeus. Short and civil. Let's meet. In person. Somewhere neutral. A coffee shop downtown, not far from the same courthouse where I'd filed my taxes. I picked a table near the window, not too secluded, but quiet enough for confrontation. They arrived together, a few minutes late. Alma wore her church smile, the one she saved for people she planned to impress. Thaddeus looked like he hadn't slept well. His shirt was buttoned wrong, one collar point folded under. I didn't waste time. I slid the folder across the table and let it land with a soft thump. "These are all the payments I made toward the mortgage," I said. "All 5 years, every penny." Alma didn't touch the folder. "I'm not here to argue," I continued. "I'm here to get clarity. You transferred the house 3 months ago, without telling me, while I was still sending payments." Thaddeus shifted in his seat. "We didn't want this to get messy. We thought you'd understand." "Understand what?" I asked. "That I was financing a gift?" Alma folded her hands. "It was our decision to make. Kaylin needed it more. You have your own place, your own life." The restraint in my voice surprised even me. "Let's be very clear. I'm done. No more checks, no more errands, and you won't be staying at the lake house. Ever." Thaddeus blinked. Alma flinched, her smile gone now. "You didn't just give away a house," I said quietly. "You gave away my place in this family." I stood, leaving the folder behind. I didn't wait for their reactions. That night, Alma called. I let it ring. She called again. And again. By morning, there was a letter on my desk at work, in her handwriting. Just a single sentence, barely legible. "We hope you'll come to your senses before the family falls apart." Family didn't fall apart when I left. It fell apart when they cut me out. I tried to move through the day, but my mind kept circling back to that phrase. Come to your senses. Like I'd lost touch with reality. Like they hadn't erased me from the equation entirely. After work, I stopped by the grocery store for basics. Coffee, eggs, a bottle of bourbon I told myself I wouldn't open. I rounded the corner near the bakery section and nearly ran into Brent Calloway. "Jarek," he said. "Man, it's been years. You still out by Clinton Lake?" I nodded. "Yeah, still there. You still with the county?" Brent grinned. "Yup." "Hey, small world. I ran into your brother at a real estate mixer a few weeks back. He said he bought the family home outright. Said your folks gave him a chance because you weren't interested." My heart didn't sink. It hardened. "He said what?" Brent scratched his head. "That he made the down payment himself. That you'd moved on. Something about you not wanting the place, wanting distance." I thanked Brent, paid for my groceries, and drove home with one hand clenched around the steering wheel. Back at the lake house, I didn't even take off my coat. I dropped the grocery bags, opened my laptop, and created a new folder. I named it Public Narrative versus Truth. They wanted a story? I'd give them the real one. The text came just after 10 a.m. Saturday. I was in the middle of folding laundry when Melissa's name popped up, Hey, didn't realize you were selling the house? Saw a sign up this morning? Open house this weekend? I blinked. Sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. No, that couldn't be right. My fingers worked on their own as I pulled up Zillow, typed in the address. There it was. A bright, cheery listing. Lovingly restored family home in Pleasant Hill. Open floor plan, modern updates. A true legacy. The contact listed was Kaylin Williams. I stared at the screen like it might apologize. Without thinking twice, I changed into a collared shirt, grabbed my keys, and headed out. The drive blurred. But as I turned onto the old street, seeing balloons tied to the porch railing, people stepping up the path with tote bags and brochures, everything snapped into focus. I parked a few houses down and approached on foot, heart pounding like I'd just jogged there. No one stopped me. The front door was wide open. Inside, Sasha stood in the entryway, smiling like a real estate agent on commission. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. "Hi there. Welcome in. Feel free to look around," she chirped, handing me a glossy trifold. I took it. Inside were staged photos of the house, furniture that didn't belong to anyone I knew. Lighting that made the rooms look like a Pottery Barn catalog. The back cover had a tagline: "A family legacy, lovingly restored, ready for new beginnings." Family legacy. There was a photo collage on the hallway wall. Kaylin hugging Thaddeus, Sasha with Alma holding a tray of cookies. Christmases, birthdays, porch swings, not one picture of me. It was like I'd never existed. I waited until the last group of visitors stepped out onto the porch, then walked back to the living room. Sasha was fixing cushions. She looked up, still wearing that mask of charm. "You're selling the house?" I asked. She froze, just for a second. Then the smile faltered. "We're exploring options." "And calling it your legacy?" She stammered, clearly searching for something that wouldn't sound worse than silence. Kaylin stepped in from the kitchen, holding a bottle of sparkling water like he owned the place. "What's the big deal?" he asked. "You had no claim. It was never in your name." The air in the room thickened. We walked outside without another word. The backyard looked the same and completely different all at once. Same patio stones I'd laid one spring by hand. Same flower beds I used to replant every season. But now it was someone else's project. "You know I did everything," I said quietly. Kaylin smirked. "You did maintenance. Big difference." I pulled out my phone, opened the files. "You want to see who paid the taxes, Kaylin? The mortgage? Who installed that AC unit in 2019? You want me to email you the receipts, or should I print them for your buyers?" Sasha appeared in the doorway behind us. She looked pale now. "You said it was clean," she said, her voice clipped. Kaylin didn't answer. At that moment, one of the buyers who'd toured earlier stepped onto the lawn. He caught the tail end of my words and looked at the house again, differently. Then he turned around, took the flyer out of his bag, and folded it into his jacket pocket without a word. Sasha walked back inside. Kaylin didn't. "You always had a chip on your shoulder," he said finally. "No," I replied. "I had a ledger." I turned and walked toward the street, not bothering to look back. That night, at the lake house, I pulled out every receipt, every screenshot, every invoice. I organized them chronologically, hole-punched each stack, and slid them into a leather binder. On the spine, I labeled it Truth. They scrubbed me from their walls. It was time to etch myself into the record. By Sunday morning, the binder was a living thing, spine stretched from the weight of documentation, tabs poking out like warning flags. I'd sorted every wire transfer, each property tax receipt, scanned copies of handwritten notes, and printouts of bank statements that traced my involvement back to the very first mortgage installment, I wasn't just building a timeline, I was constructing a wall, something to keep the lies from spreading any further. They built a myth, I told myself, flipping through the binder. I'm assembling a case. That afternoon, I drove to see Merrick. His office was in the back of his house, tucked behind a long gravel driveway and a pair of creaking wind chimes. I hadn't seen him since my father's retirement barbecue. He looked older, thinner. He didn't say much at first, just offered coffee and motioned for me to follow him to a back room filled with file cabinets. "You're here about the house," he said, more statement than question. I nodded. He opened a drawer, fumbled with a few folders, then pulled out one labeled with my father's name. After a moment of hesitation, he handed me a sealed manila envelope. "Your dad asked me not to say anything," he muttered. I opened it there, standing in that small room, a draft will, dated 2019. My name, right there, listed clearly as the inheritor of the property, if anything were to happen to Alma or Thaddeus. Not Kaylin. Me. I stared at it until my pulse settled. Then I folded it, tucked it inside my briefcase, and thanked him without another word. Back in Springfield, I called a civil litigation attorney. Downtown office. She wore practical shoes and spoke with the measured tone of someone who knew exactly how nasty family court could get. "You've got something here," she said after reviewing the binder. "Unjust enrichment is a tough angle, but you've got leverage if there was an implied promise and you can prove financial reliance." I nodded. "I don't want the house back. I want what's mine, the acknowledgement, the record corrected." She looked at me, pen poised over her notepad. "You understand? This gets ugly. There's no clean version of this story." "It's already ugly," I said. That evening, while I reviewed the timeline one more time, my phone buzzed. A screenshot sent from an old classmate named Darren, a Facebook post by Alma. "Proud of our son Kaylin and all he's built. A true leader with vision and grit. So lucky to watch him grow into the man he is today." The caption made my stomach twist. But it was the comment underneath that did something else entirely. Aunt Louise. "Didn't Jarek pay off the mortgage? I thought the house was his." 10 minutes later, there were 16 comments. Then 20. People asking questions, poking holes, some tagging me. The narrative had been publicized. Now it was unraveling. Tuesday morning, Thaddeus showed up at my office. No call. Just him, standing there in the waiting area holding a brown paper bag like he'd brought lunch. I waved him into my office, closed the door. He sat down slowly. "Look," he began, "I know you're angry, and Kaylin's under a lot of pressure. Alma didn't mean for this to—" I cut him off. "Dad, I'm not after revenge. I'm after correction. This was never about anger. It's about being erased." He looked down at his hands. "We didn't think you'd fight it." "Well," I said, pushing the draft will across the desk toward him, "you thought wrong." He didn't speak again. That night, I reviewed everything one last time, labeled the folders, printed backup copies, and then I signed the complaint. Civil motion, unjust enrichment, financial restitution requested, documented evidence submitted. As I placed it into the outgoing mail tray, I didn't feel vindicated. I felt done. I didn't just file a lawsuit. I filed an ultimatum. The courthouse wasn't what you see on TV. No sweeping marble steps or dramatic echoing chambers. Just an old beige building tucked between a bail bonds office and a Vietnamese sandwich shop. Still, as I walked through the security line that morning, binder in hand, I felt something heavy settling into my chest. Not dread. Resolve. My lawyer, Andrea, met me at the bench outside courtroom C. She was composed as ever, holding 2 copies of the witness list and the final set of affidavits. "They'll try to paint this as a family misunderstanding," she said. "You stick to facts, Mr. Williams. That's where they can't follow you." We sat side by side at the plaintiff's table. Across from us, Kaylin leaning back like he was waiting for a delayed flight, Alma wearing her Sunday pearls, and Thaddeus, eyes fixed on the table. I caught Sasha's silhouette in the back row. She didn't wave. When the judge entered, the courtroom quieted into something that felt religious. Case number 23CV842, the clerk read. Williams v. Williams, civil motion for restitution under unjust enrichment. Andrea stood. Your Honor, we contend that over a period of 5 years, my client, Jarek Williams, paid off a family mortgage under the repeated verbal assurance that the home would be his inheritance. That promise was not only implied, it was acted upon. We have records of bank transfers, written confirmations, and a prior estate draft showing him as beneficiary. She moved like a surgeon. Precise, no wasted gestures. Exhibit after exhibit laid out. Screenshots of every transfer, bank records, Merrick's sworn affidavit with the 2019 draft will attached. Then came the voicemail. Andrea hit play. It was Alma's voice, clear and unmistakable. Don't tell him yet, Kaylin. We'll handle it after the papers are filed. There were no gasps, just a chill. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Sasha looked down, hands clutched in her lap. Kaylin stood to respond. I wasn't aware of all of that. I thought my parents had handled things cleanly. They told me Jarek didn't want the house, that he had his lake place, that he was fine. And you never questioned it? The judge asked. I didn't think I needed to, he muttered. The judge paused, then looked toward Alma. Would you like to address the court? Alma shook her head. Thaddeus said nothing. I've reviewed the documentation, the judge continued. It shows a repeated, consistent financial pattern supporting the claim that Mr. Jarek Williams operated under a reasonable belief, encouraged by his parents, that the property would be his. This court does not rule on emotional betrayal, but we do rule on financial misrepresentation. She turned slightly toward me. I am not awarding transfer of property. However, I am granting financial restitution to the plaintiff in the amount of $214,000, adjusted to current value. I am also ordering public correction of the property title history, stating it was previously funded by another party. She banged the gavel once. It was done. Outside, the press was waiting. Not a mob, just a few local news crews hungry for a family scandal. Kaylin pushed through them, face down, refusing comment. Alma stayed behind. Sasha left alone. I walked past the cameras. I didn't speak. But inside, I knew they had told their version for years. Whispers in family kitchens, stories passed over potluck dinners. Today, under oath, I finally told mine. And for once, people listened. It had been a week since the verdict. No appeals, no more headlines, just silence. I sat on the porch of the lake house, a steaming mug of coffee cradled in my hands. Fog rolled low across the water, cloaking everything in soft gray. The kind of stillness that made you think about things you'd been avoiding, like what came after justice. The birds didn't sing that morning, or maybe they did, and I just couldn't hear them over the quiet inside me. The inbox on my phone had slowed. The town had moved on, or at least it pretended to, but the ripple was still traveling. I could feel it in the way people looked at me in the hardware store. Not pity, something more careful. Measured. One local news outlet had used the headline, "Man wins suit against family over secret property transfer." Another, "Brother betrayed, court intervenes." I wasn't chasing that kind of recognition, but I wasn't ashamed of it either. Then, out of nowhere, a message landed in my inbox from Mr. Hallgren, my high school economics teacher. I saw the news, just wanted to say, I'm proud of the man you became. You stood up when it mattered. Few do. That one hit harder than all the court documents combined. Kaylin disappeared from social media. Not a word, not even a half-hearted inspirational quote. Sasha deleted her accounts completely. Alma, however, had grown cryptic, posting Bible verses in flowered script, captioned with things like, "Healing begins when truth surrenders to grace." She was writing for herself now, not for anyone else. The engagement was almost non-existent. People were watching, not responding. Through a cousin, I heard Thaddeus had moved out, said he needed space, was crashing at Aunt Rena's house 2 towns over. Rena didn't post online, didn't talk much, but she didn't take in strays without a reason. Alma, apparently, sent an email blast to the extended family blaming everything on a cascade of miscommunication. No one replied. At the grocery store one afternoon, Mrs. Denning, the neighbor who once caught me sneaking out in high school, placed a hand on my arm near the coffee aisle. "We always knew it was you holding that house together," she said. "Some of us just didn't say it loud enough." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. That was enough. Back home, I walked through the lake house slowly. For the first time, it didn't feel like a hideout. It felt earned. I pulled out old sketchbooks from college, pages yellowed but still filled with ideas I hadn't touched in years. One evening, I planted daffodils along the porch rail, just because I could. And on Tuesdays, I started volunteering at a local non-profit, teaching financial literacy. Teenagers, mostly, some single moms, one guy who'd just gotten out of county lockup and wanted to figure out compound interest. It didn't make the past lighter, but it gave the future some shape. Then came the letter. I found it one morning in the mailbox, tucked between a utility bill and an ad for gutter cleaning. No return address, just my name, written in my father's handwriting. Inside was one line. I didn't see it then. I do now. T. No apology, no explanation, no request, just acknowledgement. I didn't cry, but I sat with it for a long time. That night, just as I was finishing dishes, the voicemail came. "Mr. Jarek? My name's Howard. I used to work with your father back in the 90s. I think there's something you should know." Howard picked the kind of diner where time stood still. Vinyl booths, faded pie ads, and a waitress named Carol who refilled coffee like she'd been doing it since the 80s. We met just after lunch on a Thursday. I drove the 45 minutes to Decatur without music, just the hum of tires and a dozen what-ifs tumbling around in my head. Howard was already seated. Late 60s, button-down tucked neatly, eyes that had seen things and stayed quiet. He stood when I approached, like people used to. "Jarek," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thanks for coming." He didn't dance around it. "I worked with your dad back when we ran the Mitchell Creek development," he said, sipping his coffee. "I saw the news, and I thought, maybe it's time." From his briefcase, he slid out a folder. Inside were printouts, handwritten notes, and old loan documents, dated between 2008 and 2012. "I don't know if you ever knew this," Howard said carefully, "but your name was listed as a secondary co-signer on a commercial loan Kaylin took out for a failed gym franchise." I blinked. "I never signed anything." "You didn't have to. Your dad did it for you." He let that sink in before continuing. "Thaddeus said you had good credit, no debt at the time. Said it was just a backup. Won't ever come to it, he promised." My chest felt tight. "That's why my credit took a hit in 2010. I thought it was a student loan deferment screw-up." Howard nodded solemnly. "Kaylin defaulted. Your dad covered the payments for a while, but not before it flagged your file." I stared at the papers in silence. Every time I'd wondered why interest rates were slightly higher, why my pre-approval letters always felt just shy of easy. It wasn't a glitch. It was history. "They never told me," I said. "They never tell the fixer," Howard said quietly. The ride back to Springfield was long, but not empty. My mind rearranged the years like puzzle pieces finally fitting. This wasn't about a house. It was a pattern, a lifetime of being the cushion beneath someone else's fall. That night, I stood at my kitchen counter and opened my laptop. I had a financial literacy talk scheduled for the local YMCA that weekend. Instead of just reviewing my slides, I rewrote them. I opened with a story, not detailed, not dramatic, but real. I talked about financial red flags, about boundaries, about protecting your credit even from the people you love. I didn't use names, but I used truth. Someone recorded the talk and posted it. It gained more traction than I expected. Within days, I got messages from people around town, some strangers, some old classmates. One woman wrote, "You made me check my son's credit report. I found a loan in his name he didn't know about." Alma texted a day later. "I didn't know about the loan, I swear." I didn't answer. I posted a picture instead. Sunrise over the lake, garden bed in the foreground, captioned, "Sometimes the best way to clean a wound is to stop touching it." No comments, no likes, but I knew who saw it. Later that evening, my inbox pinged. A new email. Subject, I didn't know either. From Sasha. "He never told me about the loan. He lied to all of us. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen, then closed the laptop. It started small. An email from a woman in a church group thanking me for my honesty. Then came a message from a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years. "We always knew you were the steady one." But the one that stuck with me was from a former friend of my parents, someone who used to babysit Kaylin and me. The subject line just read, "Finally." Inside was a single sentence. "It's about time someone spoke the truth." I sat in my lake house that morning, the sun filtering through the windows, warming the wood floor beneath my feet. I'd just watered the porch plants. The cat I never named lounged on the windowsill, tail flicking lazily. It felt still. For once, not in a painful way. The story wasn't locked behind our family's doors anymore. It was out, and with it, some kind of unspoken permission for others to name what had always been too heavy. 2 days later, Alma emailed me. "Lunch? Just us?" I hesitated, then agreed. We met at a diner halfway between my lake house and the city, neutral ground. She arrived first, seated at a window booth with 2 cups of coffee already poured. She looked smaller than I remembered, her posture looser, eyes less sharp. "I almost ordered you your usual," she said, forcing a smile. "Then I realized I never really asked what your usual was." We sat in silence for a moment. The waitress came and left. Alma stirred her coffee like it was a task that needed rehearsing. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally. "We just didn't know how to fix things once they started unraveling." I didn't jump in. I let the silence stretch, like an open wound breathing air. When I spoke, my voice was steady. "You didn't just lose your grip, Mom. You let go, and you watched me fall, then asked me to land quietly." She didn't cry, not really, but her eyes glistened, and her lips trembled just enough. She nodded. Not defensively, not as an argument, just knowing. We parted with no hugs, no promises, just a check split down the middle. Kaylin didn't reach out, not that week, not the one after. Through a cousin, I heard he and Sasha had separated. The house remained unsold, stuck in escrow limbo, just like him. I didn't feel rage anymore. What remained was absence. He was a character who'd exited the stage without a final bow, and I no longer waited in the wings. Then came Thaddeus. He called unexpectedly, asking if I'd meet him for a walk at Lincoln Park. I said yes. Curiosity overrode the weariness. He was already walking when I arrived, hands clasped behind his back like he was rehearsing some speech. We strolled in silence for a block, dodging joggers and squirrels. "You did the right thing," he said eventually. "We didn't." I looked straight ahead. Then why did it take court documents for anyone to admit that? He winced. Not dramatically, just enough. "Because we were afraid," he said quietly, "of facing what we'd let happen, of seeing ourselves through your eyes." The rest of the walk passed in uneven silence. He told me he was staying with his sister for now. Alma was seeing a counselor. That he wasn't sure what came next. Neither was I. That evening, back at the lake house, I found a cream envelope tucked into my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting was delicate, unfamiliar. Inside was a short note. "I found a journal. You should read it. It's about your father, from before you were born." The signature, Sasha. Tucked beneath the note was a photocopied page, dated 1984. I flipped it over. At the bottom, a single line handwritten in blue ink. "There are truths even your mother doesn't know." I stared at it for a long moment. Not with dread, not even intrigue, just a deep, weighted awareness that this story had never really started with me. The journal was older than I expected. Bound in cracked leather, the pages yellowed at the edges. Sasha had slipped it into a padded envelope with a sticky note attached. "You deserve to read this." It belonged to Thaddeus. The entries dated back to 1981, long before I was born. At first, it was ordinary. Business notes, project plans, his musings about starting a family. Then came a string of entries in early 1983 that stung like fresh betrayal. "Used Alma's inheritance. She doesn't know yet. Kaylin's venture couldn't wait. If it works, we'll replace it before she finds out." Another entry weeks later. "Kaylin failed. I told her. She cried. I promised never again. She forgave me." My name first appeared months after. "Jarek's due any day. Alma's smiling again. Maybe this will anchor us." I closed the journal slowly, laying it flat on my dining table. That one sentence stayed with me. She forgave me. Every redemption in our family came at someone else's cost. The next morning, I drove to the old house. It sat like a corpse dressed for burial. Shutters falling, mailbox rusted, foreclosure notice nailed crookedly to the door. But I didn't come to reclaim it. I came to say goodbye. I walked the perimeter, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. The flower bed I once mulched was overrun with weeds. But the outline remained. My fingerprints still buried beneath the soil. I opened the mailbox, slid in a frame. Inside was a laminated copy of my financial timeline, every payment, every receipt, my name signed at the bottom. Not to haunt, just to mark the truth. That night, Alma called. Maybe we could try again. Start fresh," she said. Her voice was gentler, unsure. I paused, looked out over the lake. "I don't want revenge," I replied, "but I also don't want to rebuild what broke me." There was silence. Then, softly, "I understand." The line went dead. It stayed that way. A week later, I was invited to speak at the Chamber of Commerce banquet. The room was filled with business owners, retirees, students. I stood behind the podium and adjusted the mic. "My name is Jarek Williams," I began, "and I want to talk about legacy." I told a story, not of betrayal, but of learning, of boundaries, of patterns. I ended with this. Your legacy isn't what you pass down. It's what you refuse to repeat. Applause filled the hall, some polite, some reverent. It was enough. The lake house took a few weeks to prep. I wasn't leaving bitter, just different. A new family came to tour one Saturday. The little boy ran straight to the backyard, laughing as he kicked up leaves around the daffodils I once planted. I smiled. That garden had outlived the chaos. I signed the listing agreement that afternoon, with the same agency Kaylin once mocked. No need to circle back. My new apartment was modest. 2 bedrooms, a sunlit corner nook. I filled it with furniture that matched nothing, on purpose. On my desk sat a manila envelope. Across the top, Jarek Williams, estate plan. I reached for it, fingertips brushing the edge, then left it untouched. The name on the deed finally matched the man who earned it. Looking back now, if there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence doesn't always mean peace. And sometimes, speaking up isn't about being angry, it's about being free. I spent years mistaking loyalty for love and endurance for strength. But real strength? It's knowing when to stop carrying a weight that was never yours to hold. It's setting boundaries, not to punish, but to protect the parts of yourself that were quietly eroding. Families are complicated. But legacy isn't just about what gets handed down. It's about what stops with you. And maybe that's the most powerful gift we can give the next generation. A cleaner slate, a truer story. What about you? Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace, only to realize you were breaking inside? Have you ever rebuilt your life from a place of clarity, not anger? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of something personal, drop a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't resonate with it, that's okay too. Let me know why and where you're tuning in. Let's start a real conversation. And hey, if you want to hear more stories that speak to the quiet struggles behind closed doors, the moments of courage that come after years of silence, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your story might be next.